we got here just in the nick of time. What does that make us?
Big damn heroes, sir.
Ain't we just?
Well, here we go again. Just when I thought they'd conceded defeat, they're back with a whole new round of wackiness. This time, Mr. Bowden himself has descended from his fake tower of ivory to address me via personal message. So let the Pwnage begin. If you look at the swirling clouds on Jupiter, they're not obeying the Coriolis effect at all, they're swirling in horizontal bands. The Coriolis effect on our weather system causes the clouds to rotate in a circular pattern. How observant is your critic, and how much does he know about the Coriolis effect? Well, let me address that second point first. I'm a university-educated professional pilot with an airline transport pilot certificate and 25 years hands-on experience with weather and aircraft navigation systems. So when it comes to weather theory, GPS navigation, or applied physics, I've got you covered. So let's return to the subject of planetary weather, shall we? Mr. Bowden, your ignorance is showing. Take a look again at Jupiter's circulation. Notice that big red dot there at the bottom, or at least it would be red if this was a color photograph. That's the Great Red Spot, a gigantic cyclonic storm in the southern hemisphere. The equivalent of an Earth-sized hurricane with winds blowing at hundreds of miles per hour. In fact, if you look at those bands, you will see that they are riddled with cyclonic and anticyclonic storms. We see the Earth's atmosphere behaving exactly like Jupiter, with horizontal bands forming in addition to those circular storms. The difference being is that those horizontal bands are not normally visible on the Earth because of the different chemistry. And because of the lower rotational velocity of the Earth, the weather systems here are not nearly as violent nor as persistent as they are on Jupiter. Here we see one of those horizontal bands. In this case, it's water vapor moving through the atmosphere. The Earth's atmospheric circulation is broken into 3 horizontal bands in each hemisphere. They break into the 3 zones because of the Coriolis effect. Along the borders between these belts, the winds reach a peak velocity, exactly as you see on Jupiter. These are known as the jet streams. We see circular storms forming along these bands and moving into the circulation zones, just like on Earth and on Jupiter. The semi-permanent cloud belt at the equator is called the Intertropical Convergence Zone. Compare its behavior to this photo of Jupiter. The simple fact is that we see Coriolis-induced cloud formations in every planet in the solar system that's capable of producing clouds in the first place. For example, the spectacular double vortex that was recently discovered in the Venusian atmosphere by the Venus Express spacecraft, or this wicked-looking storm on Saturn. These storms were recently photographed by the Hubble Space Telescope on Uranus. And of course, Neptune, we've known, has some of the strongest winds in the solar system. Notice the spectacular storm, the Great Blue Spot. So there you go. Coriolis-induced cloud formations are common throughout the solar system on planets that are known to rotate. And so you're left with the insurmountable problem of explaining why the Coriolis effect is caused by planetary rotation on every other planet in the solar system with the exception of ours. And I would remind you of Occam's razor at this point. Now, getting back to this kooky idea that the Coriolis effect is caused by the stars, I haven't even touched on some of the weirder aspects of the Coriolis effect. For example, the up and down or inward and outward components of the Coriolis effect. Normally, these are small enough not to be noticed. However, they are large enough that they've actually been adapted to make navigational instruments for submarines. And that leaves you with the rather complex problem of explaining why, if you travel in one direction, the stars seem to pull, but you turn around and go the opposite direction and the stars seem to push. Then in all this talk of the Coriolis effect, we haven't even touched on angular momentum. You see, when a major earthquake happens, the Earth's rotational period is altered ever so slightly as a result of the conservation of angular momentum. In a normal universe that causes the earthquake, the result is the rotational period change. However, in your model, the entire universe would have to speed up or slow down first. Then the earthquake would occur. Thus, the effect precedes the cause. This would be a handy thing if it was true, because we would have a nifty way of predicting earthquakes. And because we know that weather systems also cause changes in the Earth's rotation, astrologers could suddenly find themselves gainfully employed as earthquake predictors and meteorologists. Geostationary satellites would not fall out of the sky. Read Barber and Battali's paper to see that the mass of the stars rotating all around the Earth produces all the coriolis effects and the pull in the satellites that we see today. You've made the claim, but you failed to explain how this would work. You can't say that the stars are simultaneously causing the coriolis effect on the Earth's surface and claim that they are causing geostationary satellites to hover unmoving over the Earth. The two are not compatible, and you cannot reconcile the unmoving satellites with the ones moving in a polar orbit at a lower altitude. It's an extraordinary claim to say that the stars can make something hover in one place, and an apparent exception to the laws of motion, yet objects above and below behave exactly in accordance with those same Newtonian laws. Don't hurt yourself with Occam's razor there, Mr. Bowden. Pictures of the Earth do not disprove geocentricity. No, but boy, they sure look pretty. Neither does the fact that they could see the rotation of the Earth. You cannot tell the difference between helio and geo by observation. I understand your point about the observations, but what you're failing to see is the greater point that this space flight is incompatible with your model of the universe. You have an ether model that is capable of imparting momentum in some places and not in others. This is incompatible with the Newtonian laws of physics. It cannot magically reach in and stir the Earth's atmosphere while completely bypassing some of the satellites while selectively causing others to hover in place at the same time. Getting a plane to land with GPS does not depend upon relativity. That is nonsense, and he should know this. Hello, pilot here. I'm sorry, that was rude. Mr. Bowden, meet the FMS, the pilot's best friend. This little computer knows more about navigation than you will ever know. The FMS is intentionally biased to use GPS as its primary source of navigation. Why? Because it bloody well works better than any other system yet devised by man. GPS does in fact use calculations derived from the theory of relativity. Here you see the first round of calculations done by the computer to triangulate its position. GPS requires picosecond accuracy, and at that small of a time scale, relativistic effects cannot be ignored. The last term in each of these equations are in fact the time conversion for relativistic effects. Planes use a fiberglass laser compass system for direction, which is based upon Sagnac's experiment, which proves that there is an ether, contradicting Einstein's banishing of it. Well, in fact, you are partially correct. Many aircraft do use laser gyros as part of an inertial reference system, and they are in fact the descendants of Sagnac's experiment. But they are used primarily as attituded heading references and are never used on an approach as a primary means of navigation. The thing is, some airplanes are equipped with GPS but do not have laser gyros at all. And you are utterly wrong in your interpretation of Sagnac's experiment. It does in fact bolster relativity, not disprove it. And while it's true that Sagnac went looking for an ether and thought he found a stationary one, the fact is that Max von Laue had already predicted Sagnac's effect on the basis of special relativity 2 years before Sagnac ever spun his first wheel. Therefore, Sagnac's experiment is actually a confirmation of the special relativity theory. How many times do we have to tell them that the Foucault pendulum, Coriolis forces, etc. do not prove heliocentrism? No, but they do show that the Earth is rotating. Sorry, but you can't have it both ways. If the motion of the stars tugging on Foucault's pendulum cause it to shift, then that same force must be applied to a plumb bob, and we see no evidence of that. Views from space probes cannot disprove geocentricity, and you should not talk about Ptolemaic models and epicycles. Frankly, sir, you'd be better off with the Ptolemaic system. It would be easier to prove. It leaves you with the untenable position that Newton's laws do not apply to the case of the Earth. And it leaves you with the extraordinary claim that there's an ether that can cause the entire universe to rotate around a point without inducing any centrifugal force. While at the same time, this same ether can selectively add momentum when it's necessary in order to meet the observations. And don't bother referring me back to that paper, because it utterly fails to explain how the laws of physics can be applied in certain places and not in others. You claim your theory can explain everything, but you fail to provide any mechanism other than by selectively turning the laws of physics on and off to meet your needs. And you fail to provide any explanation as to how even that might come about, except for wishful thinking. How does he explain the superluminal jets that have been observed traveling faster than the speed of light? The short answer is, I don't. I'd be way out of my depth to try to explain this type of astrophysics. But what I do know is they don't bolster your case because they don't all point the same direction.
If I'm your mission, Shepard, best give it up. You're welcome on my boat. God ain't.